You just mess everything up." Mike's words exploded across the dining room, making the silverware clatter against the porcelain. My son slammed the table so hard the wine trembled in the glasses, spilling crimson drops that looked like blood on the white tablecloth. The very same tablecloth Sarah had brought back from her trip, and which I'd just freshly stained with turkey gravy. Emily, my 8-year-old granddaughter, started to cry softly. Noah, at 12, stared intently at his plate, as if he wished he could disappear right into it. The silence that followed was so heavy I felt my chest being crushed. "It's nothing, Carol. It's just a tablecloth." Sarah tried to smooth things over, her voice a strained attempt at calm as she touched Mike's arm, silently urging him to settle. I swallowed the lump that had formed in my throat. My 67-year-old hands trembled more now, not from age, but from sheer humiliation. I forced a smile. "Let's keep eating. There's dessert after this." But the damage was done. Christmas, which I'd planned for weeks, was ruined. The house, which had been too silent since I'd become a widow 3 years ago, was now filled with the worst kind of silence. The kind heavy with embarrassment and hurt. You must be wondering how we got to this point. How my only son, that little boy I rocked so many nights, could humiliate me like this, in front of the whole family, on a night that was supposed to be about togetherness and love. It all started a few weeks before, when December arrived, bringing with it that melancholy that always settles in since Anthony, my husband, passed away. The big house where we'd raised our son, where we'd celebrated over 40 Christmases together, seemed to swallow my solitary existence whole. It was one early December afternoon, as I was flipping through old photo albums in the living room, that I made my decision. The pictures showed Christmases past, little Mike tearing open presents with such excitement, then a teenager pretending not to care about gifts, but secretly thrilled, and finally, an adult bringing Sarah home for the first time to meet the family. "This year will be different," I said aloud to Anthony's portrait on the shelf. "I'm going to bring the family back." I started the preparations the very next day. First, the groceries. I took advantage of the early month sales to buy holiday pastries, nuts, candied fruit. I carefully stored everything in the pantry. Then, I went to the department store and bought a new dress, dark green, for good luck, as my mother always used to say. I called Mike one Sunday afternoon. "Son, I wanted to invite you all to spend Christmas here at my place. It's been a while since we've all been together." There was a pause on the other end of the line. I heard the TV in the background, kids' voices arguing about some show. "I don't know, Mom. We're thinking of doing something simpler this year. Work's been really demanding. You know how it is at year-end." "Please, son. It means so much to me. I'll prepare everything. You just need to show up." Another pause. "All right, Mom. But you don't need to go to too much trouble. Nothing over the top, okay?" I hung up the phone with a smile on my face. His reluctant tone didn't matter. They were coming, and that was all that mattered. In the following weeks, I planned every detail. I pulled out my old recipe cards. The sweet French toast, bake Mike adored as a child. The stuffed turkey with the family recipe. The special savory stuffing I learned from my mother-in-law. I bought presents for everyone. A video game for Noah. I asked the salesperson for help picking the right one. A doll for Emily. A silk scarf for Sarah, and for Mike. An elegant watch that cost almost half my pension that month. On Christmas Eve, I woke up before the sun rose. My body ached. My arthritis doesn't let up in the winter. But the excitement gave me energy. I turned on the radio to the station playing Christmas carols and started getting the house ready. First, the final cleaning. I vacuumed every corner, dusted the ornaments, polished the silver serving pieces I rarely used. Then, the decorating. I put up the tree that had been stored in the attic for 3 years, hung the colorful balls, and the star on top. I placed the presents underneath, all wrapped the night before in red paper and gold bows. In the afternoon, I started preparing dinner. My hands aren't as steady as they used to be. I spilled a bowl of flour on the floor, broke a glass while washing dishes. Each accident made me more anxious, but I cleaned everything up and kept going. The scent of cinnamon and cloves began to fill the house, bringing back memories of Christmases past. At 6 o'clock, I took a quick shower and put on my new dress. I applied a subtle lipstick and the perfume Anthony had given me our last Christmas together. I looked at myself in the mirror and, for a moment, saw the reflection of the young woman I once was, full of hopes and dreams. At 7, the doorbell rang. I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath, and opened the door with the most sincere smile I could manage. Noah was the first to burst in, giving me a huge hug. "Grandma! Merry Christmas!" His still childish voice filled me with joy. Emily came right behind him, holding a colorful drawing. "I made this for you, Grandma. It's our family." Sarah walked in, carrying a covered casserole dish. I brought a salad, Carol, to round things out. Her smile seemed genuine, but there was something strange in her eyes, a kind of apprehension. Mike was the last one in. He barely greeted me, just a quick peck on my cheek before heading straight for the kitchen with the drinks he'd brought. When he came back to the living room, his eyes scanned the space, noticing the decorations, the set table, the dishes I had prepared. "Mom, you really didn't have to do all this. We could have just ordered takeout." I felt a pang in my chest, but kept my smile. "Oh, nonsense, my son. Cooking for you all is my greatest joy." We sat down at the table. The children chatted animatedly about school, friends, the presents they hoped to receive. Sarah commented on her job as a teacher, the school holidays, plans for the new year. Mike remained quiet, only answering when directly asked. I noticed him constantly checking his phone under the table. His shoulders were tense, his forehead creased. I knew that expression. It was the same one Anthony had when bills were tight or when there were problems at work. When it was time to serve the main course, I carefully stood up, carrying the turkey platter. It was heavy, and my hands trembled slightly with the effort. As I leaned over to serve Sarah, my elbow bumped the wine glass. I didn't knock it over, but trying to steady it, the gravy ladle I was holding tilted, spilling sauce onto the white tablecloth. That's when it happened. Mike's outburst. The words I never imagined hearing from my own son. "Mom, for heaven's sake, you just mess everything up." The rest of the night was a blur of forced conversations and tense smiles. I tried to salvage what I could of the celebration, serving dessert, handing out presents. The children liked what they received, but the joy was tainted by the incident. Sarah tried to maintain normalcy, overly praising every dish, every detail of the decoration. When they left around 11, Mike barely said goodbye. The children hugged me, but he rushed them to the car. "Come on, it's late. You need to get to bed." I closed the door and was left alone in the living room, amidst the torn wrapping paper and glasses still with leftover cider. The silence returned to dominate the house, heavier than ever. I sat down in Anthony's armchair and cried like I hadn't cried since his funeral. I spent the next few days in a daze. I didn't answer calls, Didn't go out for any last-minute holiday shopping. The wound was too open. 3 days after Christmas, the doorbell rang. I thought about not answering, but the insistent ringing made me get up. When I opened the door, I found Noah, all by himself, a little breathless from biking over. "Grandma, I came to bring you this. I did it secretly." It was a colorful envelope with star drawings. Inside, a letter written in his still-forming handwriting. "Dear Grandma Carol, I saw you were sad on Christmas. Dad shouldn't have yelled. He yelled at Mom too when we got home. She said he was wrong. The food was the best in the world, and I saved a piece of your sweet French toast bake to eat the next day. You never mess things up. You make everything better. I love you very much, Noah." My heart, which felt like it had frozen that Christmas night, began to melt with the warmth of those childish words. I hugged my grandson tightly, feeling his thin ribs against my arms. "Thank you, my love. This means so much to Grandma." Noah smiled. That smile so much like Mike's when he was his age. "Can I stay for a bit? Dad's at work and Mom said it was okay for me to come." We spent the afternoon playing cards and eating the leftover Christmas cookies. When Sarah came to pick him up in the late afternoon, our eyes met in the doorway. "Carol, I'm so sorry about that night. I should have said something." "Don't worry, dear. It wasn't your fault." She hesitated as if she wanted to say more, but just nodded and led Noah away. That night, I reread Noah's letter several times. Every word felt like a tiny beacon, lighting a path I hadn't seen before. It wasn't just about a ruined dinner or a stained tablecloth. It was about dignity, respect, and the kind of example that was being set for my grandchildren. The next day, I made a decision. I called Mike at work. "Son, we need to talk. Not over the phone. Come have coffee with me tomorrow." He hesitated but agreed. "All right, Mom. I'll stop by after work." I hung up and felt a surge of determination I hadn't experienced in years. That Christmas night had broken something inside me, but Noah's letter was starting to piece it back together. As I waited for the next day, I looked again at Anthony's portrait on the shelf. "You always said I was too strong for my own good." I murmured to the picture. "I guess it's time to show that strength." The sun was setting outside, painting the sky with shades of orange and red. Somewhere in the city, my son was living his life, unaware that tomorrow we'd face a conversation that could change everything between us. And me, Carol, at 67 years old, I was preparing to fight for the respect I deserved, inspired by the courage of a 12-year-old boy who saw things more clearly than most adults. Noah's letter rested on my nightstand, a reminder that even on the darkest nights, there's always a light, sometimes from the most unexpected sources. When Noah left, I sat in the armchair for hours, rereading his letter. Those childish words, written with a colored pen and a few spelling mistakes, held more wisdom than many elaborate speeches I'd ever heard. "You never mess things up. You make everything better." How could a child see what my own son had forgotten? I couldn't sleep that night. Memories came in waves, like an old movie playing before my eyes. I remembered little Mike, at 5 years old, running to show me a drawing he'd made at school. "Look, Mom! It's you baking a cake!" The drawing showed a stick figure with curly hair, which I had back then, in front of something that looked like a stove. I kept that drawing for years, until it simply fell apart over time. I also remembered the first time Mike defended me. He must have been about 12, the same age Noah is now. We were at the grocery store when an impatient man pushed me in the checkout line. "Hey, watch it. That's my mom," Mike said, his voice still childlike but full of indignation. I was so proud that day. When did that boy turn into the man who humiliated me at the Christmas dinner table? The next morning, I got the house ready for Mike's visit. I baked a simple cake, one of those he loved as a kid. I set the kitchen table, more intimate than the dining room, and I waited. He arrived promptly at 6 in the evening, still in his work suit, his tie slightly loosened. He looked tired, with deep circles under his eyes. "Hi, Mom," he said, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. "Sorry I didn't call earlier. Work's been crazy." "It's all right. Sit down. I made coffee." He sat, looking around as if searching for signs of change in the kitchen he knew so well. I poured the coffee in silence. When I placed the cup in front of him, I noticed his hands were trembling slightly too. "Mom, about Christmas." I raised my hand, interrupting him. "Before we talk about that, I want you to read something." I took Noah's letter from my apron pocket and handed it to him. I watched his eyes scan the paper, first with curiosity, then with growing discomfort. When he got to the part that said, "Daddy shouldn't have yelled," his expression crumpled. When he finished reading, his eyes were misty. "Noah brought this to you himself?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, he came on his bike all by himself." Mike ran a hand over his face, trying to hide the tears that started to fall. "Mom, I don't know what to say. I was such an idiot." "You were, yes," I replied with a calm I didn't know I possessed. "And that can't happen again. I'm getting older, Mike. My hands shake. Sometimes I forget things. But never in my entire life have I disrespected you." It was as if a dam broke. Mike started to cry openly, something I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Between sobs, he talked about the pressures at work. He was on the verge of being laid off due to company cutbacks. Money was tight. Sarah had reduced her teaching hours, and he felt like he was failing as a provider. "I couldn't make last month's mortgage payment," he confessed. "We're maxing out credit cards for basic expenses." "Why didn't you tell me this before?" He shrugged, suddenly looking very young. "Pride, I guess. I didn't want you to worry. Didn't want to be a failure in your eyes." "Son," I said, taking his hands across the table, "you could never be a failure to me. But what happened at Christmas that broke me inside?" I suddenly remembered an afternoon when Mike was 7. He'd broken an antique vase playing ball inside the house, something I always told him not to do. Anthony wanted to punish him, but I intervened. "Mike," I'd said on that occasion, "I'm not mad because you broke the vase. I'm sad because you disobeyed, knowing you could hurt someone or break something important." I recounted that memory to him, and he looked at me in surprise. "You remember that?" "Of course I do. And do you know what you told me afterward? You said, 'I'm sorry, Mom. I'll never make you sad again.' And you hugged me so tight we almost fell over." Mike smiled through his tears. "I remember. Dad was mad for days, but you defended me." "I always defended you, Mike, even when you messed up, because that's what mothers do." He lowered his head, ashamed. "And I humiliated you in front of my family." "Yes, you did. And it hurt not just me, but your children too. Noah saw everything." Emily cried. "What kind of example are you setting for them?" That question seemed to hit him like a punch. He stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back to me. His shoulders trembled. "I'm becoming the kind of man I always despised," he said softly. "At work, I put up with humiliation from my boss daily. I come home frustrated and take it out on those who don't deserve it. I stayed silent, letting him continue. When I was a kid, remember Alex's dad? My friend from school? He used to drink and yell at everyone. Once at Alex's birthday party, he humiliated his wife in front of all the kids because she dropped the cake. I came home and said I'd never be like him. Mike turned, looking directly at me. And look what I did at Christmas. I got up and went to him. Even though he was much taller than me now, in that moment he seemed as small and vulnerable as the boy he once was. You're not like him, Mike. You made a mistake. A serious mistake, but still a mistake. The important thing is what you do from now on. He hugged me then, a tight, desperate embrace. Forgive me, Mom. Please, forgive me. I forgive you, I said, feeling my heart open again. But I want you to understand one thing. You are my son, but those children are my grandchildren. I don't want them growing up seeing their grandmother humiliated. That ends today. We sat down again, and between slices of cake and more coffee, we set new boundaries. We agreed on bi-weekly lunches, where he'd bring the family. I offered temporary financial help, which he reluctantly accepted after much insistence. It's a loan, Mom. I'll pay back every cent when things get better. Before leaving, Mike asked if he could take a piece of cake for Noah. Of course, and tell him Grandma sends a special hug. When I closed the door after he left, I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. The conversation had been difficult, but necessary. I went back to the kitchen and found Noah's letter on the table, where Mike had left it. I carefully put it in my dresser drawer, along with other precious mementos. The next day, I received a call from Sarah. Carol, it's Sarah. I wanted to apologize. For what, dear? For not saying anything that night. For not defending you. I was so shocked I couldn't react. But I should have said something. Don't worry about it. Mike came home different yesterday, she continued. He told me about your conversation. He cried a lot afterward, you know. And he apologized to the kids for his behavior at Christmas. This surprised me. He did that? Yes. He gathered us in the living room and said he'd acted wrong. That he'd never treat you that way again. Noah was so relieved he started to cry too. I felt my eyes fill with tears. Thank you for telling me that, Sarah. You're so important to us, Carol. To all of us. After that conversation, things gradually began to change. The following Sunday, they came for lunch. Mike was more relaxed, played with the kids, helped wash dishes. When I spilled a glass of juice, he simply grabbed a cloth and cleaned it up, saying, "It happens, Mom. It's nothing." In the following weeks, we established a new routine. They came for lunch every other week. Sometimes Noah would stay overnight. On one of those nights, as we prepared popcorn to watch a movie, he asked me, "Grandma, do you still have the letter I gave you?" Of course I do. It's kept safe in my special drawer. Did the letter help? Are you and Dad okay now? I hugged my grandson, feeling a wave of gratitude for his sensitivity. It helped a lot, my love. Sometimes we need someone brave like you to show us the right path. He smiled, proud, and turned his attention back to the popping popcorn. In March, Mike got a new job, with better pay and a less toxic environment. The family's financial situation began to improve. At one of our lunches, he paid me back the money I had lent him, with a handwritten thank you card. "Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it," the card read. April brought heavy rains and a flu that kept me in bed for a week. To my surprise, Sarah appeared at my door with a warm bowl of soup. She stayed that afternoon, helping me tidy up while I rested. We talked like we never had before. I learned she'd lost her own mother young, and secretly saw me as a maternal figure. I always wanted to get closer, she confessed, but I was afraid of seeming intrusive. You'd never be intrusive, sweetie. This house is yours too. In May, Emily had a ballet recital at school. I was the guest of honor and sat in the front row, right next to Mike and Sarah. When my little granddaughter danced, dressed as a butterfly with sparkling wings, I felt an overflowing pride. After the performance, she ran to me even before going to her parents. "Grandma, did you see? I didn't miss a single step." "I did, sweetheart. You were beautiful, the most graceful butterfly in the garden." June arrived with warmer days and a surprise. Mike showed up on a Wednesday night, totally out of our usual routine. "Mom, we're planning a trip for the 4th of July holiday. To the beach. We were wondering if you'd like to come with us." I was speechless for a moment. "You want me to come along?" "Of course. The kids are super excited about the idea. And well, Sarah and I are too." I accepted the invitation, of course. Now I'm here, packing my bags for my first trip in years. I even bought a new swimsuit, though I'm not sure I'll be brave enough to wear it. Noah's letter is still tucked away in my drawer. Sometimes when the loneliness gets to be too much, I reread those childlike words that gave me back my dignity. It wasn't just my grandson who saved me that day. It was the courage of a child who taught me that, even at 67, I could still demand respect. Last night, as I was sorting clothes for the trip, I found the green dress I wore for Christmas. For a moment, I thought about throwing it out. It carried painful memories, but then I decided to keep it. It reminds me not just of the humiliation, but also of the strength I found afterward. This morning, as I looked at myself in the mirror, I noticed my face looks different. The wrinkles are still there, of course, but there's a light in my eyes that had been extinguished. I thought about what I'd say to Anthony if he were here. "You were right, old man. I'm stronger than I thought." The phone rings. It's Mike, confirming what time they'll pick me up tomorrow for the trip. His voice sounds light, almost jovial. Before hanging up, he says, "Mom, thanks for giving us a second chance." "Always. There are always second chances for those we love, son." I hang up the phone and go back to my suitcases. Life at 67 isn't what I imagined it would be. It's harder in some ways, with the aches in my body and the trembling in my hands. But it's also richer in others, with the wisdom only years can bring. That broken Christmas forced us to rebuild something better, stronger, and truer. And in that rebuilding, I rediscovered not just my family's love, but my own strength. Tomorrow we're going to the beach. I'll feel the sand between my toes, hear my grandchildren's laughter, watch the ocean that stays the same while everything else changes. And maybe, just maybe, I'll even wear that new swimsuit. After all, as I've recently learned, it's never too late to start over.